Meanwhile, a group of people calling itself South Africans Against Apartheid India is marching to the offices of the Indian Consulate General in Johannesburg today to protest against a controversial new citizenship law. The Citizenship Amendment Act makes it easier for non-Muslims in Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan who settled in India prior to 2015 to obtain Indian citizenship. Now, 23 people have been killed in protests across India since Parliament passed the law earlier this month. Chriselda Lewis, our reporter, is outside the Indian Consulate in Parktown here in Johannesburg, and she's with a group of protesters. So let's cross over now to Chriselda to find out what's happening there. Chriselda, good morning. Please give us a sense of the protests currently taking place.
Well, a very good morning to you, Sakina. This is very much a solidarity protest to what we've been seeing unfolding in India. Widespread protests there, which have left several people dead. And this group that has gathered here at the Indian Consulate in Parktown, Johannesburg, says it's marching in solidarity against that new controversial citizenship law which was recently passed in Parliament in that country, which they say basically continues to marginalize and block the naturalization of Muslims in that country. I mean, in a country where you've got about 1.8 billion people, about 14% of that being Muslims, they say that basically this pushes further the anti-Muslim sentiment in that country. So they'll be handing over a memorandum in just a couple of hours here at the Indian Consulate in Parktown here in Johannesburg, and part of the demands in that memorandum call for a cessation to the violence there. They're also calling for some of the protesters to be released and are basically calling in general for a scrapping of this new controversial law. You would know that this protest was started by university students in that country, and basically they're saying that the Prime Minister of that country, Narendra Modi, should look into scrapping this as it further pushes an anti-Muslim sentiment. Joining me now and part of the organizers of this protest, Fatima Laher, who is with South Africans Against Apartheid India. Thank you very much for your time, Fatima. Talk to us first of all about, the aim of this protest. We know in general it is against this new controversial citizenship law.
The aim of this protest is very centered upon, we saw the student-led protest in India, and as student activists back home, it is something that we related to. And with the current anti-Muslim agenda, we believe that after the laws passed in America, the UK, China, we felt that something had to be done. Another country cannot be pushing a fascist movement and we do nothing. So we decided to take a stance, and we've united under the group South Africa Against Apartheid India.
Fatima, talk to us a bit about why this law itself is controversial.
So the Citizenship Amendment Act, together with the National Register of Citizens, it's controversial in the sense that it doesn't provide citizenship to, so first of all, if you're a citizen or if you're an illegal immigrant without the documentation, the necessary documentation, you then go through a process. So if you are Sikh, Christian, Buddhist, you can apply for citizenship. However, if you are Muslim, you get put in you are detained and you're not allowed to apply for citizenship. So it's inherently discriminatory.
Given that this solidarity protest is taking place in South Africa, I also have to point out to, India being part of the BRICS nations themselves. Is this part of you saying that others who form part of the BRICS group of nations should also embark on this kind of action to get the message across to the those in power in India?
That would be great, but taking into account that BRICS is a group of fascists, India is led by a fascist government, Brazil is led by a fascist government, China is led by a fascist government. We cannot rely on the BRICS nations to stand in solidarity with India. However, South Africa itself, we need to put pressure on the South African government to rethink its policies and where it stands in BRICS, surrounded by fascist nations.
terms of this, if you talk about, some of this applying to for example, those coming from Pakistan, Bangladesh, if you look about their naturalization, I mean, you have what you're saying is also the exclusion of the Rohingya from Myanmar and others as well.
Exactly that. So the Rohingya from Myanmar have fled their nations because they were being persecuted in their home country. So they are currently seeking refuge in India, and India is providing citizenship to every other religious group except the religious minorities that are truly suffering, such as the Rohingya in Myanmar, the Ahmadiyyas in Pakistan. And India has over a large Muslim population, so it is an inherently discriminatory law, definitely.
Part of what you're calling for, I had a glimpse of your memorandum, you're calling for those who've been arrested in these protests to be released. That's just part of it. Talk us through what also is contained in that memorandum.
So at around 12 o'clock this afternoon, we plan on handing over the memorandum to the Indian Consulate, where we ask for the revocation of both the CAA and the NRC. We've asked for the cessation of police brutality and the immediate release of all detained protesters. We've asked that the reinstatement of internet in those states where it has been cut. And lastly, we plead to the Indian government and state to respect its constitution and its secular values.
Right. Fatima Leher, thank you very much indeed for your time. That memorandum, Sakina, will be handed over at 12 o'clock here at the Indian Consulate in Parktown here in Johannesburg. Of course, this protest taking place here behind me against a controversial new citizenship law in that country, which critics say further marginalizes and blocks the naturalization of basically Muslims.
Oh, thank you so much, Chriselda Lewis, tracking that story of protest against some of the laws being passed in India at the moment. Well.